meet this challenge, we need a food system which treats people with dignity and as active participants in the food system rather than as passive consumers. So talking about this today, we have Vera Zakharov from Sustain, we have Irina Martin from Nourish, we have Dee Roots from the Independent Food Aid Network and the Landworkers Alliance, and Growing Solidarity, who are based on the Hemp Cooperative in Reading, and they are our participants in the Community Resilience Project, which is a Landworker Alliance national lottery-funded project, which is seeking to help build practical responses to the food crisis in this country. I'm McAndrew. My role at the Landworkers Alliance is managing and coordinating the Community Resilience Project. So to kick us off, we'll have Vera Zakharov.
Hi, thank you so much for having us here and for joining, and for everybody joining online as well. So as Catherine mentioned, I'm based at Sustain. We're an alliance of organizations and communities working together for a better system of food, farming, and fishing, and cultivating a movement for change. In a way, I feel like that's what we're going to be talking about today. And I work on the Sustainable Food Places program, which is a network that brings together pioneering strategic food partnerships from towns, cities, boroughs, and counties across the UK, driving innovation and best practice at a local level on all aspects of healthy, sustainable, and equitable food. So just a quick intro on our work that kind of intersects food, climate, and justice. Sustain has been working on building the case for putting food production and diets, or if you will, food culture, transforming our food culture at the heart of transitioning to a more sustainable society and averting climate change and the destruction of nature. We do this through a number of ways on an advocacy level, through our farming and trade work and work around ensuring just food access. Some of the things that we're doing are lobbying for agroecology to be the focus of land use policy within the UK. We've also been doing quite a bit of work on the National Food Strategy. One of the things that we're focusing on is updating the buying standards to deliver more climate-friendly meals into the public sector. And I thought this was like a good entry into the Sustainable Food Places work, where this intersects with food justice for us, is making sure that the meals that people access that is paid for by us, the public. So our public sector meals should be a kind of vanguard and an exemplar of healthy and sustainable food. So this should be where we're modeling climate and nature-friendly meals. And also for many people for whom that may be the best and most nutritious meal they have all day, especially children receiving free school meals, those should be climate friendly. So that's one of the things that we, through Sustain and Sustainable Food Places, are calling for. And this is actually one of the key elements of the new Sustainable Food Places campaign that we've just launched, called Food for Planet. So I encourage you guys to check it out. So for us, we want to make sure local areas working on climate and nature-friendly food are ensuring that this is the base standard, that it's just not something that people are accessing if they can afford it. So that the very kind of the food that anybody can access, particularly through public sector meals, meets our climate and nature standards.
Amazing. Yes, so my name is Irina Martin. I work for Nourish Scotland in the Dignity in Practice projects and the Peace Please project. So I'm mainly here to talk about the Dignity in Practice project, which is very much linked with food justice and climate action. So we work in partnership with Nourish and the Poverty Truth communities, and we work alongside our community advisory team, which consists of peer network community food initiatives across Scotland and people with lived experiences of food insecurity. We started in 2016, and it's been an extraordinary journey that evolved really dramatically, especially since the pandemic, from exploring the detail of what promoting and enhancing dignity looks like in community food provision, to a right to food and system approach. So it's really important to really focus how our project have changed since COVID-19, and from the responses of COVID-19 and the increased reliance in community food provision from the third sector and many other initiatives that started a response of the need for food provision. So in this rush to develop these new forms of food provision, there was a risk to forget an important lesson from the past, which is designing the design and delivery of responses of food insecurity can either enhance or undermine a person's sense of dignity and overall well-being. So what we did, we adapted our dignity principles in practice for organizations to use as a tool to make sure that dignity is at the heart. And we design and deliver with our network inclusive and very participatory workshops. We ran over 30 workshops, and there was a huge list of demand of really organizations wanted to say, I want to provide the best service to the people in need in my community. And then there was like over 300 organizations that have taken part in those workshops. These include food banks, larders, fridges, the NHS, local authorities, other support services. It was just really overwhelming the wide variety of organizations and people and volunteers that were coming to our workshops. These really reflected the large number of people working in this sector. And there was really interesting learning. And this is when we've really kind of like changed our approach, because towards last year in December, there was a real sense of exhaustion from those communities, getting volunteers to work, the exhaustion of physical and emotional from people and organizations. And even the dignity team, we had to really ask tough questions. And one of them was like, is this really what we're going to be doing? Running workshops so community food initiatives can have more like dignified services. And we realized that it's really not sustainable. Any form of food aid is just not good enough. Any form of food seen as a charity is just not good enough. And also among the organizations that were coming to the workshop, they were like, trying to really make sure to have adequate food with people, like taking surplus food, mobilizing volunteers. It was just such a challenge to bring cultural, accessible, healthy food, because we are all humans, we all need food, every single one of us, regardless of where we come from. So we were like, we need something else, we need something new. And that is when we realized we need the right to food and we need a food systems approach. So this will clearly set the responsibility on the government and ensure everybody has access to good food. So another really interesting learning, which is really inspiring and very much linked to climate action and what is currently happening, is that these communities are developing something new, okay? Something new is happening that is like a revolution, an alternative to the current capitalist system that has taken us to the climate catastrophe that we are right now. And it's a new set of values based on solidarity, and you're going to hear from Growing Solidarity and the video that we're going to show you. A different set of values and the resilience. These communities are able to listen where the real change is happening. And Greta, I think she said a couple of days ago that it's a grassroots organization that is where the change is happening. So it's just been amazing to be part of this. And yes, I will just finish here. Yeah.
We'll hear now from Dee Woods from the Independent Food Aid Network.
So I'll probably start with Landworkers Alliance. So I'm the Food Justice Policy Coordinator and one of the directors. And our work is not only about advocating for better conditions for agroecological farmers and land workers. It is about rights-based approaches. So right to food, which is a major pillar of food sovereignty, that's the other thing we advocate for. And our work is a mixture of on the ground grassroots work as well as governance, making sure that we are creating the enabling policy spaces. And that's from the international right through to the local. And in terms of the Independent Food Aid Network, we emerged several years ago as organizations who were doing food aid to come together, one, to advocate for people, the very same things you've just been talking about, to end the need for food aid, but also to support people and communities. Whilst, because it's not going to happen overnight. These conditions, these situations, because of capitalism, because of austerity, because of the legacies of colonialism and imperialism.
So, can we take a microphone?
Okay. Yeah. So, sorry, people. I'm not sure if I could go back and repeat that. I will try. So I was talking about IFAN and how IFAN emerged from grassroots as organizations who were doing and still are doing food aid in local communities, coming together not only to support each other, but to advocate for changes in policy to ensure that everyone can have adequate food, nutritious food, culturally appropriate food. So likewise, we do work around the right to food. We do work around busting the myths around why people are hungry. People aren't hungry, people are in poverty. All right, people don't choose to be hungry. It's not because they don't work hard enough. All right, so we bust all these myths, and we support each other as a national network, and especially during this pandemic, where it has been really, really difficult in terms of accessing food, in terms of supporting people, all battered, weary, injured like me from doing that work. And we just need to make things right. And our work is rights-based, like the Landworkers Alliance, right? We put people and their rights at the center.
Hello, just wanted to say it's a real privilege to be here sharing this panel with all of you organizations doing really fantastic work. So thanks for having us. So our project, Growing Solidarity, is hosted by Hemp CoOp, and Hemp CoOp is a workers cooperative based in South Oxfordshire, and we make and produce hemp and CBD products for the benefit of people, community and planet. Just a very quick plug. If you want to hear more about hemp and how hemp should play a part in the movement for food justice, Hempen has a talk on Tuesday, 9th of November at 2 p.m. at Civic House.
Yeah, so just to say a bit more about the Growing Solidarity project. So it's part of the Community Resilience Project, which is funded by the Landworkers Alliance. And it's essentially an experiment at a kind of grassroots level to explore how we can develop food, sustainable supply chains, essentially, that are empowering and participatory for the people that they serve. And it's specifically oriented to people who are facing some sort of food insecurity, facing barriers to accessing healthy and nutritious food. So at the farm, like our main focuses are around growing healthy food in a collective way, and kind of the journey from the growing to the packing to the distributing. And our kind of bigger goal is to also make sure that people have a say in what it is that they're growing as well, given that they'll be eating it. And yeah, so we also work as part of a larger network in Reading, working in collaboration with different community groups that are looking like out for the basic needs, but also more than the basic needs of people who face marginalization.
Yes, so our projects, well, Sophe and I met through both being involved in various different kind of grassroots direct action groups, and we're inspired to kind of basically just start what we've been doing. We're inspired by the mutual aid networks that set up during the first lockdown, and how they really put cooperation, mutual understanding and solidarity at the heart of everything that they do.
Yeah, and so basically the community resilience project's focus is obviously around like producing healthy food, but a huge part of that is like that outcome, but also creating something that is involving people. That's the kind of the bigger importance, like what Irina was also mentioning quite a lot, is like that thing that is about like empowerment. And it's a very socially kind of oriented thing. It's about building relationships, and it's about, yeah, about being kind of in relation to each other. So there's a few things that we kind of wanted to share with you that we've learned, particularly on that kind of social human to human level.
So, yeah, many of the people that we work with have different difficult life circumstances. And so in order for people to want to come to the farm and for the growing stuff that we do, we have found it really important to be clear about what we're offering. And the food growing bit is just one element of why people want to come on a regular basis.
Yeah, so essentially people come for other reasons other than growing food, and then the food part of it is like another outcome. So yeah, kind of connecting to nature, doing kind of creative activities and just chilling out with each other is a really important part of it too. And essentially like that doesn't happen without a really strong emphasis on building trust. And it sounds obvious, but actually it's something that we've found like you really have to invest like time and kind of build that consistency. Like we kind of come across as these random people who are like, hey, we want to do a good thing, but actually like, why would anyone want to do that good thing with us? And maybe they don't think that's a good thing. So essentially we found that like having a kind of really consistent and reliable relationship that we don't expect to kind of exist straight away has been really important in terms of like collaborating with a big variety of different organizations who we're now at a point where they refer people who might benefit from being involved, and also the people themselves. So that's been a lot of like meeting people where they're at and where their interests are already, and then from there seeing what evolves from that, and not having like a kind of imposing kind of relationship. Yeah, a collaborative kind of vibe, basically.
Thank you so much to our speakers. I mean, I think we've got a really good mix of organisations and projects here, in the sense that this is a demonstration of the sort of building blocks and principles that we need for a food system that works for the people it's meant to be serving. Now we're just going to have two videos, one from Nourish and one from Growing Solidarity, sort of demonstrating some of the themes that have been addressed in practice. And then after that, we'll open it up to the floor for some questions and answers and comments and contributions.
Technology, how do we survive without it?
Yes, once again, sorry for all the technical issues.
You know, climate change can be such a daunting thing. Like it feels like we're sort of heading right towards climate catastrophe. And I know from many conversations in the courses that a lot of people spend sleepless nights thinking about anxiety. And it's such a complex topic that we got to meet on so many different levels. You know, we got to make changes in our lives. Community in how we grow and consume food on national and international levels. I think now, having worked here for a while, I feel like what I found is that engaging in something that's action-based on a community level is so good, because you have the feeling that you're really starting to take those steps and really starting to make that new world that we need become a reality. So if people are worried about this and are spending sleepless nights or want to get involved, then I also much encourage them to come down and be part of this, because we really got to it seems like we really got to start building that from the ground up and from the community level to reach those bigger changes.
Okay, next we'll have a video from Growing Solidarity showcasing their work.
The Growing Solidarity project is a project that we kind of developed in response to, well, initially hearing that people really wanted to spend more time in the natural world. It's an experiment to see how to develop sustainable supply chains that are empowering for the people that are using them or relying on them. So kind of replacing the food bank model of going somewhere and being given something and having a more kind of participatory relationship with it, which involves learning how to grow the thing in the first place, or being part of the packing of that thing, or deciding what the thing is even that's growing to start with. And then Wednesday is our kind of more out there in the community day, where we deliver things that we've been growing and we've been packing. And that is to Reading Refugee Support Group's Food Bank Network, and also to Reading Red Kitchens Network as well, which is like a kind of food drop-in. There's something magic about being in this space, which is quite dynamic and quite busy, but there's so many spots where you can just really not do anything, or not be busy, or not, not be full. And I think a lot of people that come do feel very full, like very busy in their heads. And there's a kind of the detensing that I notice in them when they come.
Okay, now we're able to sort of open it up to the floor for questions and contributions. I'm just letting you know we've been given half an hour, so we'll go on till about 12:15 rather than finishing at 12. So yeah, if anyone's got any questions or contributions, we'll take about 3 questions and then open it up to our panelists. Oh, yes.
Is that on? Are we working? With the public sector food procurement, are there any concerns about getting the government and policymakers on board with both the high standards and also the accessibility? So, for example, is there a fear that you might get a win on improving the sustainability of the food standards, but the compromise might be that they raise the income threshold because of the potential costs associated with it?
Thanks for that talk. That was really interesting. I just wanted to ask, because I think food sovereignty and the kind of the rights-based approach runs through all of your projects and your advocacy. I just wanted to see, because I'm not really privy to much of it in the UK, what the policy terrain is like and what your experience has been like trying to kind of secure that rights-based approach within UK policy. Yeah.
Hi. This question for anyone really. I'm speaking for someone who does work in East London, so in a kind of quite an urban environment, and where there is a lot of food insecurity, and definitely food growing and those sorts of projects are part of it. But when there needs to be when so much more food is needed, I'm really wondering what people's thoughts are on sort of supply chains and what we can do to really get good food, good, nourishing, sustainable food, into those sorts of projects, because in a sort of urban environment, the growing is only going to be food that's grown is only going to be a kind of a small part of that. So, thinking about sustainable procurement and what we can do to sort of change some of the current situation around the sort of nourishment and the sustainability credentials of the sort of food that ends up in our food security project.
Is it all right to kick off? And I'll touch on the first and third question. So I think that's why, in terms of the question around sort of the potential trade-offs, if we increase sustainability standards of our food within procurement, might that have a negative effect on the overall public purse? Might that shrink who has access to it? I mean, firstly, to say we are really clear, I think, sustain our entire alliance, some of whom are represented here. We do not call for trade-offs. This is why it's so important to be advocating for food access, justice around food access, and justice around sustainability. One should never be pitted against the other. And that's actually why we're weaving these conversations together, that there's a kind of indignity to say that one has to choose either to feed themselves calorically or to be able to access food that does not harm people, animals, or nature. That is absolutely unfair. So perhaps the answer is at the end that we simply as a country need to be spending more money on food. But to say this is one of the things we've been working on within sustainable food places. I think a really interesting area is looking at school meals, for example. And we've done some research a couple of months ago into what caterers are doing. And one of the things they're saying is actually it's not costing us more to improve the sustainability of our food. We're making the balances. So for example, shrinking the meat content in school meals and increasing the pulses. So doing something with chicken and chickpeas rather than just chicken. That is actually saving them money. Or it's not necessarily saving them money, but it's keeping it the same. So actually there's a lot of innovation. The things that are limiting factors is, for example, school food standards that still advocate effectively 4 days a week. At the moment, the most you can do is 1 meat-free meal a week. And so they're ready for innovation. They have the expertise to make it work financially. They're limited by government actually not being able to create that kind of flexibility for them to innovate. So the readiness is there. So I think that is actually, there's a lot that we can do. A lot of this is around reducing our meat and dairy content, and that will allow better standards, that will allow better welfare and sustainability standards for the meat and dairy products that we do procure. And there's actually quite a lot in terms of vegetables and pulses that we can be increasing, so there's a health impact. And quickly on the kind of urban setting, I mean, this isn't necessarily my area of expertise, but the way I look at it, especially with the problems with supply chains recently, we need more diversity in our supply chains. And there needs to be more access for smaller and mid-size producers and suppliers to be able to enter these supply chains. And, you know, I'm still interested to learn more about what dynamic procurement might bring around this, but I'm not an expert in this area at all. But I think it's that kind of flexibility that we see lacking at the moment. And of course, I'm also interested in some of the work happening around peri-urban farming. Can we be doing more with the urban fringes and actually linking that into public procurement supply chains? I wonder if that could be one element.
Yeah, so I could follow on from that. So some of the work, as Catherine touched on, that we're doing at Landworkers Alliance is around sort of fringe farming, and Sustain are involved in that as well as the GLA. And it is to open up the land around cities, including London, Bristol, I think Glasgow now as well, Sheffield, to actually develop those sort of supply chains that would be more sustainable, more production of localized foods, but also about bringing communities in. I think a lot of times farmers are in their farming community, farmers and growers, and not necessarily part of a community. And that's what we're trying to do with both the Community Food Resilience Project and with the Fringe farming, to bring different people together. So I think it's more than just alignment. You know, it's about connecting all the dots. So from policy to community development to dignity to waste, you name it, connecting all the dots and making something that's intersectional.
Yeah, I just might come in on sort of like the sort of fringe farming project, and particularly on the issue of sort of on school meals and school and you know, and procurement, because one of the interesting projects that we encountered as part of the fringe farming projects is a organisation called Grow, which is based. It works at Totteridge Academy in Barnet. So the way that project works is, so Totteridge Academy, like many schools, has a lot of excess land, a lot of fields that it didn't really know what to do with. So what Grow did is they approached the school, asked to grow on a couple of acres of their land, and in exchange for not paying any rent on that land, they taught pupils from the school essentially how to grow food for an hour a week. Half the food that's grown by the pupils is then provided to the cafeteria to provide sustainable, healthy, very short supply chain food to the students. So essentially by growing food on school land, you're solving several issues at once. One, you're solving the issue of of long supply chains. You're also solving the issue of poor quality school meals. And you're also solving the issue, I think, but most crucially, of teaching people how to engage with the food system, how to grow their own food, and are preparing them to be the next generation of agroecological farmers. So I think that by encouraging schools to take this up, by allowing small farmers to grow on their land and teach their pupils and provide pupils with decent meals. Additionally, with the rest of the produce that that grower produces is then sold to the parents for a CSA scheme. I think that's one of the things that sort of has really stood out for me from the Fringe Farming Project. Is that this is a it's one of the things that both uses the resources that the state already has to try and accelerate the growth of peri-urban farms, and also tackles of many of the issues that we've just been talking about. So yes, are there any other questions? I was just wondering, have we had any questions for Zoom?
I don't think we've addressed all the questions, but also to follow on from that, for a lot of schools, especially in urban areas, they don't have that land. So, how do we create those relationships with farmers, growers in peri-urban and further afield to ensure that we do have proper, good, nourishing food coming into the cities, but also involving families and those communities in part of that. So to answer your question about governance and policies and food sovereignty, I think Scotland and the Good Food Nation Bill is a really good example of bringing food sovereignty principles into policy. Wales are doing similar. England are seriously lagging behind, but in 2016, the Landworkers Alliance, along with several other academics and organizations, we produced an integrated food policy, national food policy proposal called A People's Food Policy. And that was crowdsourced and developed, and actually the current national food strategy has taken quite a lot from it. All right, so it is possible to move things in at London level as well. With the London food strategy, we managed to get food sovereignty principles in there. And when I talk about food sovereignty principles, it is about the sustainability, it is about people having agency, it is about people having access and choice. I'm bringing in things such as agroecology, regenerative, all those various buzzwords, but making sure that we are producing sort of food policy that will see us through for many generations to come, and isn't something that's going to need change in 2 years down the line because it doesn't work.
Sorry, oh, is that okay? Okay. Yeah, just to add to what Dee was saying as well, one of the things that we found more earlier on in the project, but still very relevant now, is like realizing how many people that wanted to be involved actually face barriers very simply to like how they can grow food in a convenient way. So one of the things that we kind of experimented with, like, and we are still like exploring, is like how can we increase food production in a way that's really just very simple and easy. And obviously in different urban areas, there's different kind of different trends in terms of like correlating people who face insecurity with how much space they have where they live. But in Reading particularly, there's a lot of people who do have back gardens or do have little kind of boxes, like not boxes, sorry, like windowsills where they could put food boxes on, or like balconies or whatever. And actually one of the things that we found as I'm not sure if we technically are peri-urban or just like outside, but we're only 4 miles away from Reading, is that we have access to a lot of the raw ingredients that you'd need to be able to grow food. And we could actually make that link and essentially offer people who don't have the means to buy all of the things, because gardening, especially to start off, can be quite expensive. So we actually could bring the raw materials of a window box, some soil, some seeds, and help people to just do like up their production, like from where they're living as well. Yeah.
Just to complement to what Dee was saying, even though, yes, it's amazing that in Scotland we now have the Good Food Nation bill on the table, we also need to continue pushing, and we want a bill that is ambitious and that has the right to food in it. And I think I will ask you as individuals, as organizations, to take part in the variety of consultations that are here at the moment, because even though the bill is out there and it's in the public and it's approved, we still need to be pushed to be ambitious and to hear the voices of all of you. So the moment we got the local food consultation, and then we have the end the need of food bank consultation, that we got to take part. And there are lots of workshops going on that we're really happy really to share, so you can get involved in that.
So I think so. One of the little dots I think that needs to be joined is around, and it's kind of about government policy as well, is about our ability to grow our own food. And at the minute, it's incredibly difficult to grow hemp because of the licensing regime. We have a farm that basically was told that they weren't allowed to grow hemp because the field is next to a road. And like they come up with ludicrous reasons time and time again to make it incredibly difficult for small scale farmers to grow hemp, which is an incredibly nutritious plant-based food. So yeah, it's kind of a smaller picture, but definitely one of the dots that needs to be joined.
I wouldn't say smaller picture because there are lots of barriers. So from planning to housing, because most farmers and growers can't afford to find suitable housing. You can't build a lot of times on land. Access to land itself is another issue. And then sort of issues around marginalization and race, where access, land and resources and training. But I think one of the major issues is that, we can't conflate food system issues with social welfare and, money issues, financial issues, that right to, socioeconomic and cultural rights. So people are hungry in this country because they're poor, right? So we need cash first solutions for that. So better welfare, we need to get rid of no recourse to public funds, right? Because people have a right to live on more than £4.25 a week. And, living income, so living wages, if you're working, better working conditions. And we find that farmers and growers are literally victims within that, being unable to afford food themselves. So we need to value our food more and value our food producers more.
Shall we have a couple of questions from the Zoom, and then a few more from the floor, and then we'll have a sort of final discussion bit, just conscious of the time, and then yeah.
Sure, thank you. So we have a couple of questions from the virtual room watching. One really does cover what Dee was just talking about, but it says, this is from Madeline, who asks, how do you balance the access based on the right to food and sovereignty at the same time as supporting farmers and food producers who are barely scraping by. Really, how do you connect the two issues? And there was a second question about the national food strategy. What are the panelists' critical thoughts on how we can take this forward? So either of those.
Thanks. Do we have any further questions from the floor? Oops, wait for the mic to get.
Yes, a lot going on, and thank you so much for your work. I used to do similar kind of things in the South Bronx some years ago before I moved back to Scotland. So just to say that the Good Food Nation bill is coming through the committee that I sit on in the Scottish Parliament, and in Scotland there's a word "wappet," which means feeble. And my feeling is that this, Good Food Nation, so many people in Scotland have been working on something that should have been robust and, incredible and setting a framework, and it's really not there. So I really appreciate your call for getting people to engage, because I'm on the inside, but I really need people, screaming from the top of their lungs that they want something more than that is in that bill, because right now it's a plan about making plans, and it's looking like it's going to be quite hard to really give it the robustness. It's about there's a question about the rights to food. So the plan for that is that there's going to be a general human rights bill coming through the Scottish Parliament in a couple of years' time. It's very frustrating because it feels like I wish that was coming now so that we could then weave other things into it. But anyway, that's coming, and the right to food will come in that one. That's the idea that the Scottish Government's put forward. But I think that I do want to pick up on this question that someone has asked online, which is this piece for me, and I love this, I just learned this term, fringe farming, awesome. But it is this bit about the scale of food that we need to produce for people. And I sometimes wonder, having been in the community garden movement and getting people growing food locally for a long time, are we doing that because we don't have the power to change our farming systems? And so it does come back to policy. And now that I'm kind of on the Rural Affairs Committee, I'm realizing that, yes, we're having the conversations with the farmers and the farmers' unions, but who's behind the farmers? Who has the interest that is keeping the systems that we've got going? And I feel like that's some of what I want to start working on, is tracing that back. Like it's like you start to think about agri-industrial machinery and agri-industrial chemicals and all that kind of thing. It's like, and I speak to farmers in Scotland, and they're really proud of what they do. And in Scotland, we have good food policy, food production, but something is keeping people in a particular direction. And of course, another piece of that is the agricultural support system that keeps people farming in a particular way. And that will change when we change how we fund farming as well. So a few things there, but just.
One last question, and then we'll bring back to the panel.
Hi, I'm really inspired by the work of Landworkers Alliance in particular, but everyone on the panel as well, particularly because they seem to be at the forefront in the UK of bringing the political issue of essentially land and freedom. On a fundamental human level, this is an age-old political, access to land is an age-old political issue, because it's recognized that not only our food, but our shelter, our health, our energy, our sort of more holistic mental health and well-being aspects all come from being able to access green, healthy spaces. And now in the UK, we've become historically so dispossessed from land, so disconnected in quite a traumatic way, that trauma is increasing quite far in our past, that we've somehow lost that focus on that political essential connection between our land and our fundamental well-being and health as human beings, our freedom as well, increasingly. And I wonder if people on the panel just wanted to speak to how their ideas on how, as well as the amazing what you're already doing, how we can promote that as a sort of core driver of a political issue that then can filter down into all these different policy areas, rather than maybe having to focus on the narrow policy areas and hope that it builds a sort of groundswell towards access to land, healthy food, healthcare in general and well-being.
Is it okay if I start? And what I'll do is I'll have my call to action in this as well, because I know we're so short on time. So really quickly on national food strategy, we know that the white paper next year is going to be delayed. There's going to be quite a few months between the kind of start of the year. Well, we have it's a bit of a waiting game. But one of the things I want to say on that is we have a number of policy calls, but what we need to do is mobilize our networks around it. So, and that includes individuals, community groups, food partnerships, local authorities. So one of the things I wanted to say, if you're really interested on this, and there's a lot of really good recommendations in the National Food Strategy, particularly around reducing our meat consumption and increasing the kind of actually investing in better farming practices, but also improving access. I mean, National Food Strategy, I think, is a pretty decent document, and we would love to see it really championed. So one of the calls is, please follow Sustain. Please join our newsletters. Be at the ready, not only to act, but to also to mobilize your networks. And really, if you're interested in this kind of piece specifically about food and climate, do get involved in the Food for the Planet campaign. Encourage your local authority and food organizations, food partnerships in your area to take this on, because we need to have our networks at the ready, because there will be moments to act, and we need this to be a really public movement. Really quickly on the access to land, I think this is where what I would love to see is at a local level, kind of food access groups and climate justice groups really collaborating, because I think you're completely right. This is we have a kind of crisis of land access, crisis of commons. People deciding how our land is used or abused are not the majority. So I think we need to have those kind of discussions, and they have to have inclusivity and dignity, that this isn't just the domain of the privileged, how we decide what happens to land, but this is actually, it's rooted in like the kind of the deepest, it's like a human right to make sure that the land that we and our future generations live on is not destroyed, and that we have a place too. So I think there's something about actually collaborating on a local level. And I genuinely believe, this part of my work, is that when people are able to root themselves in the community and physically root their fingers in the soil, I think that does change a sense that you have agency and that you have a voice. I think there's something that happens, and it allows people that have been told all their life that their voice and opinion doesn't matter, that it does have a place. So I think there's something we need to be doing about making the food political, but actually inviting everyday people involved in these small, amazing community projects to say, you know what, we have something to say.
Okay, we haven't got much time, so if we could just sum up and then sort of draw the session to a bow. Whoever wants to go next.
What's the sum up?
Yeah.
Yeah, essentially, I think essentially for us, the kind of grassroots kind of conclusions that we have is this really important thing about what can we do to improve access to land and empower people to make decisions about how it's used, and how can we in a really meaningful way connect with each other. And that sounds quite I don't know, cheesy, but it is all about the relationships as well as the relationships to land. Yeah.
I think for me, it's similar. It is about relationships, and it is about going beyond building solidarity. We'll all be and are being impacted by climate change, particularly within our food system. And we are only going to get through this by working together. If we don't have a sustainable food place or food policy unit or whatever it is, right, that shouldn't stop people from coming together and, working things out. I'm just an ordinary person who literally got sucked into the world of food policy by wanting to change things. All right, but do that together with other people. Don't leave anyone behind.
Well, I must echo what is said. I always go back to that video that I love from Justice and Common Earth in Edinburgh. If you want change, join a network go to your local community hub, go to local community garden, connect with people, be loud, you know, say it loud and clear and with a network and with you know, something behind you. There is a lot of material out there for every single interest. So you go there and yeah, let's do it together, right? Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone, for attending this meeting. That was an excellent discussion. Thank you as well to everyone joining us online as well. If you want to continue the discussion, we'll be hanging around for a little bit after this. And yes, thank you so much for attending. Thank you.